Throughout the 20th century, the people of the United States faced many conflicts that challenged both the moral ideas of the country as a whole, along with the moral ideas of individuals. During the 1920s, Americans feared that immigrants would take their jobs and change the culture of our country. So we created laws that made it illegal for immigrants to become part of our country. And those immigrants already in the country could not find work. And those who searched for freedom were denied the chance to fulfill their happiness. Following the bombing of Pearl Harbor in 1945, the government of the United States placed all Japanese Americans into internment camps. We thought that anyone affiliated with the Japanese community was against the United States. After World War II, the U.S. feared the Soviets' power during the Cold War. Why were they winning? Why were we losing? Acting out of self-preservation, Senator Joseph McCarthy claimed that numerous U.S. government officials had sided with the USSR, providing valuable information about the U.S. to Russia. Was that even true? Who cares? It was a possible answer as to why the U.S. was losing. Thus, men who were assumed to be a traitor by the public were thrown into jail for most of the Cold War. While all of this was going on, segregation ruled the South as it had been for almost all of our country's existence. Blacks were separated and isolated from society. But why? Because of the color of their skin. For some reason, we feared that if blacks had equal rights to us, we may lose our power. Blacks were to use separate restrooms, dine at different restaurants, ride in the back of the bus, and go to different schools. They also were to be beaten, terrorized, and killed when they didn't follow what the whites wanted. During the same time, the Vietnam War was going on. Was it our job to help stop the North Vietnamese army and the Viet Cong from invading and spreading communism throughout South Vietnam? We sent in hundreds of thousands of young men who were ready to start a life at college or even start a family. But because some people felt it necessary to fight communism, we put the Sons of America at risk in a war that some people believed we didn't even belong in, which in turn wounded over 300,000 of our men and killed almost 50,000. Were any of our actions moral? Yes, the shift in our values was the result of our attempt to protect ourselves. However, the actions that protected us discriminated and limited the freedoms of somebody else, whether that be the immigrants, the Japanese, or even the U.S. government officials that were innocent. Even though we hate to say it, it is very obvious that the U.S. overlooked the importance of maintaining our values, such as national dignity, respect, freedom, and security, during the 20th century. We always thought that we were the best. However, it kind of seems like we're the problem. Taking away the rights of blacks, getting involved in wars that we had no business in, lying to an entire country, blaming the innocent, socially dividing different cultures, restricting hopeful immigrants from obtaining their dreams, putting our men in danger, and providing weapons to groups that would soon turn on us. Is any of this morally correct? A lot of times throughout history, our values and morals have been challenged when we are in danger. And most often than not, when we protect ourselves, we end up putting other lives in danger. Thus, we shift our values with the sole purpose of protecting ourselves. And when we blame other individuals or groups, the accused disregard their own moral values in an attempt to protect themselves as well. It's like a domino effect. As the values of one group shift to protect themselves, those being blamed or ridiculed against for reason or not must abandon or shift their own values to protect themselves. However, there are a select few that stay true to their values. Shifting moral values in a response to fear only creates short-term protection that does not carry on to help future generations. A question about moral comes into play here. Are our actions of the 20th century moral? Well, that all depends on how one defines morality.
Like your code of ethics and how you define what is okay and what's not, and what's good and what's bad.
Someone's personal morals on what they should do in a certain situation.
I would say I think I define morality by doing or behaving in a way that I can stand by. So like if I can explain it to somebody else, if I have a rationale for why I'm doing what I'm doing or saying what I'm saying, and it's a solid one, then I feel like that's how I define.
Morality is kind of like your own personal code, like the way it decides whether you go to sleep at night with a clear conscience or whether you stay up worried about something you did.
Doing the right thing in terms of other people. It goes back to the golden rule, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you.
doing something that would not interfere with another person's rights to do things.
Morality is the idea of what is right and wrong and what is good and bad regarding the thoughts and actions of groups, people, or of the individual. However, the problem with this is that everybody has a different definition of what is good and bad or right and wrong, which makes it much more difficult to explain whether or not something is immoral. Obviously, there's clear things that are correct and wrong to do. However, it's much harder to decide what is moral and what is not when everybody has different ideas of what is right and wrong. Starting in the 1920s, the government of the United States passed immigration acts that restricted immigrants from entering our country. We did this solely because we feared that soon immigrants would take our jobs as a result of their willingness to get paid less for the same work as whites. So, in order to compensate with this fear, we created a law that made it illegal for people to enter our country that we thought were a threat to us when all they wanted was really to just give their family a better life far away from the problems of their own country. The United States is a country that had always advocated for freedom and liberty, which is why so many people wanted to be a part of it. However, immigrants weren't granted the freedoms they had wished for and could no longer find work in the United States, or it was much harder for them to find work that paid well. It was simple from the standpoint of any white American. Don't hire the immigrants or make their work conditions so bad that they'll want to quit, then they'll never take our jobs. But how were immigrants then supposed to make money to help provide for their families to obtain this idea of true happiness? Okay. In novels such as The Great Gatsby, it is evident that it was difficult for immigrants to make money in the United States due to the fact that they could not find jobs that paid well enough or even find jobs at all. This is seen throughout the character Wolfsheim. Wolfsheim is of Jewish descent and works in the bootlegging industry because that was really the only way that he could make money. The only way that a lot of immigrants were able to make money was by legal manners. Immigrants and other men did not want to be bootleggers. It went against their moral beliefs of honesty, dignity, integrity. However, because the United States made it so hard for immigrants to find work with good pay, people such as Wolfsheim had to work in the bootlegging business if they wanted money.
That's actually, I would do it, even though it would break my value of not stealing or breaking the law. But if it's for survival,
I'd have to say, yeah, I would. You know, even with, because your morals in that situation, at least mine would be if I was in that situation. I gotta protect my family. I gotta put food on the table. You know, I need to make a living because I'm not the only one that people are depending on. Even if I am, I gotta protect myself. And I know that the government's not gonna look out for me.
I would do it because I wouldn't, especially because if that's illegal and the government is the one that's telling me that I can't work because of who I am, like I wouldn't respect them anymore because I wouldn't want to abide by a government that's like already repressing me and my people.
The system and do it.
I would absolutely cheat the system, especially if the law in place is kind of stupid. Cheating is just finding a way to get around something that people don't like. Not necessarily wrong.
As we heard earlier, it was extremely difficult for immigrants to make a decent amount of money in the United States. One of the only ways these immigrants were able to make a lot of money was to participate in illegal transactions. However, making money illegally was never valued by these immigrant families. However, because we made it much harder for them to make more money, they had to abandon their values, such as honesty, in order to actually survive. These profits that these individuals pocketed were even greater than the amount of money that white bankers and clergymen were making. Thus, because people thought that money was the reason for their happiness, white Americans then began to integrate themselves into the illegal bootlegging business, just like Jay Gatsby, to help them thrive in the materialistic world that the U.S. had become. Illusions such as the idea that money buys our happiness oftentimes are so desirable that we forget about our moral values in order to obtain that end goal, such as happiness. Newsflash. You can't put a price on happiness. Happiness can't be bought by the amount of things you have. Yes, maybe having some expensive items such as some new clothes, some new jewelry, a new purse. Yeah, that's great, and you'll be happy walking around in that because you'll feel like $1,000,000, but that's not what true happiness is. True happiness comes from your family, support of your friends. It comes from the act of being able to do what you're passionate about without worrying what other people think. Immigrants didn't believe in bootlegging. They didn't believe in working in illegal acts. However, it was one of the only ways that they could really make money. And then whites saw how much money they were making. They left their jobs. They wanted to become bootleggers because that was an easier way to make. So the more money you have, the more items you can buy, the more happiness you have. That's the way. Illusions cause us to shift our moral values, for the better or for the worse. Money buys happiness is an illusion. You cannot put a price on your happiness. Happiness can't be bought. Happiness is something that is brought with friends and family. Passion, hard work, accomplishment. That's what happiness is. Happiness is not the number of shoes one owns, not the number of silk shirts Jay Gatsby has. That isn't a representation of happiness. True happiness comes from the items that you cannot truly hold. So, this illusion that money can buy happiness, it was so desirable that people lost sight of their values, which in fact didn't really help them at all. World War II is the Cold War, better known as the McCarthy era. The people in the United States feared the spread of communism. As the Soviet Union continued to dominate us and spread its borders farther into the surrounding countries, the United States frantically searched for an answer as to why the Soviets were winning the war. We were fearful. Senator Joseph McCarthy had the answer. Well, actually, he was just a good liar. He claimed that he had a list of government officials who had secretly sided with Russia without even knowing whether or not any of the people on his list were actually against the United States. But again, people in the United States started to blame innocent people, just like they had started blaming innocent Japanese Americans as the enemy, and blaming them for Pearl Harbor when they had nothing to do with it. The only link that they had was that they were Japanese, like the bombers of Pearl Harbor. This evidence that Joseph McCarthy was giving the United States was not reliable evidence. But who really needs reliable evidence in a time of fear? Who says it's wrong to jail innocent people? It is. It's wrong. This idea of blaming innocent people and punishing them for doing nothing wrong is seen throughout the Crucible, which really illuminates this idea of the McCarthy era. In the Crucible, many people were blamed for witchery. If one was asked, "Have you seen the devil?" and they responded with no, that was the truth. They hadn't seen the devil. But the people of the church then thought if you said no that you were sided with the devil. So you couldn't tell the truth. If you told the truth, you were killed, you were punished, you were jailed. You couldn't tell the truth. Obviously, mostly everybody, values truth. That's a lot of ways that we create good relationships, being truthful, being trustworthy, being loyal. Except during these times, when your life is in danger, and the only way that you can survive is by lying and saying, "Yes, I've seen the devil," like in the Crucible, many people are going to lie. So that's helping you. But then how's that going to help future generations with the same problem? Is everybody going to have to keep lying? Who can you trust in these kind of societies? Can you trust Joe McCarthy? Not really. He's claiming that people in the United States were to blame. No, but they weren't to blame. That's not moral. You can't blame people without knowing, without concrete evidence. But they did it. In a life and death situation, what would you do? If the only way you could stay alive was to lie, would you lie? Or would you not be able to live your life off a lie? And would you tell the truth?
I feel like I'd want to try to change it, but I know that if I was only one voice, it'd be a lot harder. So I may go against it and just lie to save myself.
So would I. I would do that too.
Lie, and like that would definitely be against one of my values, but I would say that's one of those, like, I guess you could say, like, fork in the road moments where you have to decide whether, like, you want to align yourself with your morals or if you want to do something to protect yourselves. And I don't think morals are like kind of like an unstoppable force that can never be broken. Like, you can go against your morals in dire situations because that's just like what is needed of you. So I would say
How is that morally correct, lying to survive? It baffles me. Obviously, people in both the McCarthy era and people that were blamed for witchery in the Crucible know that they weren't actually communists during the McCarthy era. They knew that they weren't actually involved in witchery. They hadn't seen the devil. But because they're so scared, because they're so fearful, they conform to this idea that they knew wasn't even true. But they conformed to it so they would survive. Here we see that some people don't even believe in this idea, and they still conform and disregard their moral values just in order to ensure their survival. Times of war are difficult. We're scared, but not everybody's scared in the same way. Is it morally correct to send young men to fight in wars when they don't even agree with the United States' involvement in the war itself? We fear other countries when they pose threats to us or our world, and thus we end up putting the lives of young men in danger. There will always be people that disagree with the war based on their moral values, whether or not we really do belong fighting on the ground. Sadly, the reality of war is that soldiers get killed, and not by accident. Some people oppose to the idea of war because they believe it is immoral to kill other people. However, in a life and death situation, what would you do? If there is a man shooting at you from across the battlefield, what would you do? Accept the fact that you might be hit or try to hit the guy before he hits you? Chances are that in this dangerous situation, soldiers will shoot back at the enemy in order to protect themselves. Obviously, people's values do not align with killing others. However, when put in dangerous situations during war, many times soldiers have to shift their values and shoot the enemy in order to protect themselves. War is a little different, however, because unlike times during the Red Scare, soldiers did not shift their values just to protect themselves. They're trying to protect themselves and get revenge on the soldiers that they have killed. War is different. It's not as easy to stay true to your values. You aren't just going to stand there. You're going to fight back and kill the enemy, whether it is moral or not. Riot after riot, march after march, blacks never gave up. Whites constantly reminded them that the black community in the United States would never have the freedoms of a white man. Segregation separated the two races in places such as public restrooms, schools, and lunch counters. Whites in the South burned black buses, beat black men, and threatened to kill them. Why? What threat were the blacks posing to the white community that the whites needed to disregard their value of respect and shift their morals to a place where they looked down upon an entire race? Blacks didn't value violence. They saw no purpose in it when fighting for their rights. How was that going to help them? You can't fight fire with fire. It just makes more fire. They would march and they would sing and they would never, ever stop. Blacks remained respectful to the whites when whites were disrespectful for them. Blacks didn't fight back with violence, even when they were beaten by the whites. They united as one and were powered by the integrity of their morals. They were not only able to receive their rights, but all generations of black Americans would be granted the fundamental rights of the U.S. Constitution in the future. The black community in the United States could have easily disregarded their moral values and participated in the violent fight that the whites were hoping they would respond with. However, blacks were able to stay true to their values, which in turn not only granted them protection under the Constitution, but led all future generations to be protected under the Constitution. It's important to note to never abandon your values for protection. Don't cheat your way to happiness. Be proud of who you are. Be confident in your morals and values, like the black community. Because with confidence and values comes success. Yes, by shifting your morals. As we can see throughout the power unit, those who never lost sight of their moral values were not only able to protect themselves in the present, they were able to protect all future generations, unlike those during the 1920s and the Red Scare, who either abandoned or shifted their values with the sole purpose of protecting themselves in the present. They wanted to protect themselves during times of fear, danger, and a loss of rights. The idea of fear and danger overpower the importance of our moral values. During the 20th century, we immediately responded to fear by discriminating others and limiting their freedoms in the United States as a result of the shift in our values to protect ourselves. We did not want to discriminate against anybody, but because we saw them as a threat for some reason, we had to create a law and used force to show them how powerful we were in an attempt to protect ourselves. These groups, such as the immigrants, the accused government officials, and the Japanese, had to shift their own values in order to survive. They either had to forget about being honest or forget about their dignity. Honesty was no longer important. Yes, by doing this, individuals were saved. However, it didn't help anybody else. However, blacks stayed true to their moral values, and in the end, not only did they protect themselves in the present, but they protected all future generations of blacks in America. Recently, President Barack Obama visited the Hiroshima Memorial in Japan. The memorial that is dedicated to the men, women, and children killed by an atomic bomb dropped by the United States during World War II. Tens of thousands of people died instantaneously, and more deaths followed days, months, and years after the bombing due to the radiation that had affected their bodies from the bomb. President Obama explained, "Technological progress without an equivalent progress in human institutions can doom us. The scientific revolution that led to the splitting of an atom requires a moral revolution as well. That is why I have come to this place." President Obama explained how terribly powerful nuclear weapons are and how it is unjust to use such weapons during an act of war due to the serious consequences nuclear weapons bring about. Obama feels that it is immoral for countries to use such powerful weapons because, yes, it does mean protection. However, it is unjust to kill tens of thousands of innocent people when we're really just trying to hit the enemy. For example, while we were fighting Al Qaeda, we weren't fighting the citizens of Afghanistan. We were fighting those who were part of the terrorist groups. There were instances where we accidentally killed innocent men, which is one of Obama's concerns regarding the use of nuclear weapons. Yes, we need to protect ourselves, but not to the extent of killing over 80,000 innocent individuals. Obama then continued to say that we must continue to change our mindset about war itself to prevent conflict through diplomacy. Obama then continued to say, "We must change our mindset about war itself to prevent conflict through diplomacy. Above all, we must reimagine our connection to one another as members of one human race." As soon as we began to grasp concepts as young children, we have been taught to always respect higher authority and believe everything that they say, because chances are their opinions and ideas are right and ours are wrong. As a result of this, some people end up shifting their values in a negative way in a response to this. For example, in school, we are to always respect what our teachers say. However, what if what they say goes against one of our moral values? Do we shift our moral values to align with their opinion because we have to assume they're right? Or do we keep our own moral values and disregard what the higher
I sure hope not. That would be really sad if that happens. I hope that enough teachers, and I think enough teachers do, and I hope that this is true, create a space for all opinions.
If it's a teacher or principal, especially because of the education system that I'm in right now, which is very highly ranked and very successful, I usually try to take it as just like, they've probably been through most of what I'm going through. They know what happens on the other side. So yeah, I probably respect it and, kind of take it as, I'm younger. And the only way to find out is by taking their advice, acting that way, the way they say that you should act and the way that they say is appropriate. And if it doesn't pan out the way that you like, and if it's really starting to affect your life, then you go back to your own morals. But if not, there you go, you've learned a valuable lesson. So I always respect their judgment first.
I should assume that he has more knowledge than me, he has more wisdom, I should respect him. But if he says something that's like bad, then I'm not gonna listen to what he says anymore. If he says something that I think is out of line, I'm just gonna lose all respect for him.
I would say that I would like be an advocate for like what I believe in. So like an example of that would be like legal rights and like gay marriage. Like that wasn't always something that was legal, but because like it is one of my morals and values to ensure equal rights, then I would like say that I would fight for that.
I mean, I would obviously be respectful, but I think that there have been times where I argue a lot with people, so just because somebody of like a higher authority were to tell me like I'm wrong, I wouldn't necessarily believe that I'm wrong because I like to think I'm always right. But at the same time, I would kind of like be a little timid to like fight back and like be like, no, you're wrong, because they are of higher authority.
Do you think that some teachers don't teach certain topics because they may go against the teacher's own moral values? Do you think that some teachers don't teach certain topics because they may go against the teacher's own moral values?
I think teachers have to strike a balance between what should be taught and what their own initial bias is. Because you could teach any big idea with a variety of different examples. But me personally, as a teacher, before I teach about something that it could be controversial, I make sure everyone understands my own bias towards the topic. Because not only does that model how to look at historical bias and understanding where people are coming from, I at least give an opportunity for other people to have other biases that might go against my own. So it's tricky, of course, because I'm subject to my own bias, but as long as I'm clear to my students about what my bias is, then that can maybe open doors for them to be willing to at least address on their own terms another perspective on things.
I would say absolutely. I'm going to take it from my area of study, like science. One of the things that, I firmly believe in is evolution. I believe in a lot of things, but there are some states where you can't teach that. Now, would I teach that even though that's what I believe in a state where they say you can't teach it, knowing that it'll probably cost my job? Interesting question, okay? It puts people in a tremendous dilemma. And the same is...
Yeah, I think that can happen, for sure. I think in the context that you framed it, when war is concerned, I think it's an interesting thing to watch teachers plan for war, because I think there's a direct connection between someone's personal experience with war and the way they choose to teach it. And that's not good, that's not bad, it's just kind of what it is. I think I like to take the perspective of perception in war and try to pull out the different parties and how they kind of navigate war, because it's a question that I have as a person that I like to hear students grapple with.
How is this going to affect us to develop opinions about controversial topics if teachers may not teach everything because it goes against their own moral values? I guess we will have to see for ourselves.